Hi, it's Finnabair here and welcome to my channel. Today I've got a journaling video for you, and honestly I didn't plan this project to be a video class, so I just hit the recording button and I worked on these pages as I usually do when nobody's watching. So I hope you're going to enjoy this process, and my comments are going to help you to understand what are my ways of thinking. First of all, a few words about the book. This is a little book I bought during our trip to Japan, and I absolutely love the format, the paper, the print, honestly everything about it. And I knew I will turn it into something special, so now, step by step, it is turning into my personal journal. Inspired by the color of the paper, I want to focus on more vintage feeling, and I would love to include some teabag art into it as well. So my first steps are going to be to prepare the background and then make a decision what kind of message, what kind of story I want to tell on this page. I started with one good coat of white gesso. This is Art Basics white heavy gesso, which I applied with my silicone brush, and it wasn't perfect application because I wanted to see part of the print through it. I dried the gesso perfectly with the heat gun, so I could be sure that I can work on the pages safely. They're very delicate, flimsy paper, and I wanted to make sure color won't bleed on the other side because I want to use as much of this journal as possible. This project is inspired by Art Daily Cafe mood board, and it is about telling stories and fairy tales, and it should include green color. So in the first moments I would like to find the right image, something that is going to help me to tell my story and express my feelings. I go through my stash and I check different images I prepared for that purpose. Once I have the right image, I stick it on the top of thicker paper, so it is going to be easier to keep it flat and work on it properly. And then I take beautiful butterfly I cut out of the scrapbooking paper, and I cut around the shapes of the bodies to make sure I can slide the wings behind the women's back. So I take my craft knife, I take a match, and I cut it carefully to make sure the placement of the wings will be correct. Once in the right place, the two ladies look like two happy fairies from the fairy tales, and I feel very inspired by that imaginary. I just want to create more. Because the whole story is about fairy tales and books, I want to add a bit of stenciling, which is inspired by the vintage looking text. So using my silicone brush and modeling paste, I'm adding a bit of stenciling on the both pages, on the top and on the bottom. I'm using one of my stencils, and I dry everything with the heat gun to make sure nothing is going to be smudged by accident. This way I get beautiful white texture ready for the next layers. When I think about fairy tales and stories, I get quite romantic images in my head. So one of the things I wanted to include in the page, there were pieces of lace. So now I am going through my stash and carefully pick small details, flowery patterns from the pieces of lace, and I cut it out to make sure I will have enough to make composition really special. I pick really small flowers, something that I can easily layer under the composition or add it as an accent on the top. This way I will have a lot of beautiful options to pick from. The next element I want to include is my tea bag. I cut it before and I removed all the tea from inside, so now I have beautiful brown flat paper, very similar in color to the original paper of the Japanese book. And then I layer it on the gesso and I try to combine it with lace to prepare a beautiful background for my magical photo. Bit by bit, I keep adding papers and pieces of lace to create layers under the image. It's a lot of checking and picking the right pieces that are going to work the best. I just take my time and I check with the photo from time to time how much of the color or the pattern will be really visible later. I keep gluing the layers using gel medium. For example, 3D gloss gel or 3D matte gel will be very good options. This way I can make sure all the elements are going to stick perfectly and everything will stay nicely in place. I have a lot of vintage papers, mostly taken from old books or old postcards, and I can look for the best ones that are going to fit just right. I keep adding elements under the photo, but also start thinking about some balancing composition on the top page as well. So whenever I add something, I can always repeat similar item on the top. This way, the composition will look more balanced. For the top composition, my choices were quite simple. A piece of paper, a bit of washi tape, and a bit of lace. Not too much, but just enough to give nice colorful balance to the photo and add the accent that was much needed. I keep adding little bits and pieces under the photo. They are some die-cut leftovers, they are some little pieces of paper with holes inside, whatever I can find on my table, and it is going to fit in the right place. Finally, I add some fabric tape, the last pieces of lace, and I dry everything with the heat gun to make sure elements are going to stick nicely, so it's going to be easier to paint it without any fear that something will come off. When everything is dry, I take a bit of the same Art Basics White Heavy Gesso and brush it in the selected parts of the page, mostly covering just a little bit the papers and the scraps of paper that I have from die-cut machine. And after that, I dry it again with my heat gun to make sure everything will stay nicely. Now it is time for the vintage touches and a little bit of grunginess. I take my tea infusion, very strong tea, and I drip that tea infusion on the top of the page to create some natural looking splatters. That is beautiful golden brown color, and I can dry it completely with the heat gun and continue my work with any medium I like. When the tea splatters are dry, it is time to work on the finishing touches, and one of them is green thread. I used around the photo, wrapped it carefully a couple of times, and that made the colors really pop, but also it helped me to emphasize the connection the ladies have and the special bond between them. Another portion of the thread I was trying to put under the photo to make it a little bit more natural and maybe not so organized as the page is now. The other touches I wanted to add their extra piece of very simple striped washi tape and some staples, and they were holding parts of the composition in place, but in fact they're only for decoration purposes because everything was glued perfectly anyway. My next step was adding extra color. So far I have only used tea infusion, so the golden brown, and now I wanted to add more of the green. For this step I'm going to use liquid acrylics from my Art Alchemy collection, and the colors are emerald and avocado green. Liquid acrylics are very potent, very highly saturated paints, so you only take a little bit to get a lot of color. That's why I'm going to use very small brush, and I will apply the colors very carefully and I will water them down. Step by step I start adding green tones, mostly under and above the photo, to make interesting color flow and create almost like watercolor effect. You can get that done by applying small amount of the liquid acrylic and adding extra water to help it flow. It's very interesting alternative to spraying technique. In the next moments I keep adding color and adding water to make sure the details of the lace or papers are going to be visible nicely, and I add water of course to help the colors flow, but also sometimes I can see it is too much and I can pick up the colors with the towel or the baby wipe. This way I can decide how much of the color I have on my page and work on the saturation as well. Very quickly everything is done and I feel I have enough of the green on my page, so I take my heat gun and I dry it completely. I want to make sure paper is really dry because, as I mentioned before, this Japanese book has very flimsy, delicate pages, so I don't want any problems on the pages behind and before my journal art. When everything is dry, I can take a bit of white gesso and dry brush it again on my composition to tone down the colors a little bit. This is also helping to highlight the details of the lace or the layers of the paper and take away a bit of the color if you decide you have too much of it on your page. Gesso is always your friend and it's like must-have in every mixed media project. The whole project is about books and magic and fairy tales, so there was for sure the fairy tale ingredient needed in this. So my choice was the Art Alchemy Sparks paint in golden brown color called Chest of Gold, and I wanted to add this as a little bit of accent under the photo and above the photo. And this paint is again acrylic paint, so it is going to react with water, so it's easy to make just delicate touches if needed. Sparks acrylics are very easy to work with. You can apply them with a wet brush to make the colors softer, or you can just paint them straight as they are, or like me, you can splatter them to make beautiful golden dots. And the only thing is you have to water the paint down a little bit so it comes off the brush easily. I think this group of little splatters makes a huge difference on the page, and I absolutely love that effect. Before going to the last steps, of course, again, I had to dry the project to make sure all the splatters are dry, all the paints are dry, and nothing is going to bleed by accident. It's really important if you would like to keep your work as it is. For the last stage of my work, I'm going to focus on the finishing touches, and these are going to be super shiny elements such as sequins or glitter. It is not easy to glue little bits such as sequins on the uneven surface, but I take a bit of soft gloss gel, which is very sticky transparent gel medium, a small brush, and then patiently, bit by bit, I apply the gel and I put the sequins in nice vintage gold color in the right position. And then I try to press them down so they stick. This is the part of work that requires a bit of patience. But if you don't have that much of the patience, you can just stick them and leave them to dry naturally. And after an hour or two, especially if you leave it in a dry and warm place, everything will be finished and ready to go. And here it is, the finished page. It is combination of the threads, papers, sequins, a bit of acrylic paints, and a lot of vintage vibe in it. I hope you enjoyed the process and you feel like you would like to create something as well. Thank you so much for all the comments, because I'm going to read them all. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them under the video. And I would like to thank my patrons for supporting me and making projects like that possible. And I would like to thank you all for all the support, love, and using my products, which you can see in so many places all over the internet. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. It would be great if you can hit the like button and subscribe the channel, or follow me on social media on my Instagram and my Facebook account so you won't miss any of the updates. Thank you so much, and I wish you a wonderful creative time.